Hello and welcome to Guys Dealing with Feelings. Welcome you in today, and I sure appreciate you listening to us. And this is the podcast that's dedicated to men's mental health issues, providing practical solutions. My journey has been profoundly shaped by the tragic loss of my son, and through this experience, I've gained valuable insights. I'm here to share what I've learned and continue to discover along the way. If you find this podcast helpful, please like, share, subscribe, and follow wherever you're listening. Following us and your 5-star review can make a significant difference in spreading our message and potentially changing someone's life. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcast under Guys Dealings with Feelings, and on YouTube and Instagram at ITU Thrive. That's the letter I, the number 2, the letter U, and the word thrive. So we're going to be changing up a little bit, and I'm going to have Jason on. Jason and I we've dedicated to be here together on a regular basis with you all, and we will be discussing different topics. Today's topic is going to be how we find ourselves stuck. I know in dealing with this on social media and talking to so many people on social media, feeling stuck is something that we all find ourselves dealing. Well, not all, the word all is too much probably, but so many of us find ourselves dealing with on a regular basis. Just how did I get here? Why am I here? How do I get out of it? Hamster in a wheel, doing the same thing over and over, not chasing what we want in life or what we think we want, not really knowing what we want, all of these type things. And so when Jason and I were discussing this, we said, what would be a good broad topic to jump on? And feeling stuck is a very broad topic. I believe we will probably parse out some individual topics out of this one topic, but we're going to start with being stuck. Jason, as always, bro, it's great to see you.
Yeah, I guess always want to say hi to everybody. And you said it, man. Yeah, the whole intention behind this is to help,
Hmm.
help clarify, help support. I'm just excited to be a part of it and maybe to participate in my little part of helping in the world.
Sure. I don't know a good analogy, but when you see the two of us sitting together and talking, we can have an incredible conversation, but Jason really brings so much, I guess intellect's the best word, so much study, so much information, so many theories that you've researched and understand and go through. And I'm so appreciative. I'm appreciative to have you as a friend. We've had some gaps in our friendship as far as time goes, but we've known each other for an extremely long time. I know Jason's somebody that I can trust with everything. I believe he knows the same about me. We do not want anything but to help people. We've been through some really tough shit. We've made some really bad decisions in our own lives, and we want nothing more than for others to find themselves where we find ourselves today, A, but B, let everybody know that they're not alone. We're not here to preach to anybody. We're to say, hey, we fucked up a lot too. And we've gone through some really tough circumstances. We've suffered some trauma, just like a lot of people out there. So yeah, man, I'm super excited to have you here. I know what it's like on the layman side of things, and having your experience and intellect and all the things that go with it is so valuable for everybody. I've got a comprehensive list. It's a short one, but it's something that can get us going. And some of the main things that I believe lead to people finding themselves in a stuck position with a broad stroke: fear, comfort, and being overwhelmed. We get ourselves into situations like jobs or relationships or agreements, and we don't want to be there anymore. We're like, what am I doing? I don't even want to be here. And I've signed this contract, or I've gotten into this contract, or I've gotten into this relationship. Somebody's moved in, or, I've gotten into this job and I signed a contract with the job and I hate it. These type things. And we're like, oh my God. And we just get overwhelmed with all this. So here's the list: 10 things: fear of failure or success, lack of clear goals, low self-esteem, comfort zone. So being in your comfort zone, feeling overwhelmed, procrastination, unresolved trauma, toxic relationships, economic constraints, and lack of support. Now, in reading that list, I see that probably a lot of us deal with more than just one of them. I know for so long, living in that comfort zone was a huge thing for me. I wanted security and I wanted safety, quote unquote. And I fell into a comfort zone because I had a roof over my head and all the bills were paid. But I wanted to, I didn't venture outside of that. And that went to fear. And I would say fear of failure was where I always lived versus fear of success. But I can see that maybe that was it too. Like if being afraid of that, and then we start putting things off and procrastinating, and then things build up on us and we get overwhelmed. That's 3 or 4 of them. And then, something bad happens and we experience trauma and we don't do anything about it. As many know, I sat around for years doing the same. So what do you think about that list, Jay?
Yeah, man. So
it's big, huh? There's a lot.
Yeah, right. There's a lot in there. I mean, the first thing I did when we came up with the topic was I went to the internet and I went to AI and I posed the question. So why do we get stuck? And so, and I found lists like you did, right? Having a lack of clarity, having fear and self-doubt. That was there. Overwhelmed, difficult situations. And I have another page here that has just similar relationships, not processing trauma. So yeah, I found in my research, I found similar ideas. Here's another list. But listen to this one. You don't know yourself that much. You're not honest with yourself. You're not connected to your purpose. You're spending time with the wrong people. You forgot about your goals. You're caught up in anxiety. You don't know how to set goals the right way. You're burnt out. You're tired. You can't let go of the past. Pessimistic. Waiting for the perfect life. Compare yourself to others. Don't take responsibility. That's a big list. And there was a lot of different ones on that one than what you found, right? At least the list that you ran into.
And still at the heart of it, there's the core things with accountability, holding yourself accountable, reflection, setting goals, setting a routine to stick to the goals. But let's talk about how, without getting even into trauma, so one who finds themselves stuck, but they haven't suffered anything traumatic. So they feel like they're doing, I was raised to get a job that had a retirement or a 401k and go to that job every single day, have a family and all that. And then here I am and I feel stuck. I love my wife and kids. I don't think I like my job. I'm just trading time for money and I feel stuck. In that, I feel overwhelmed because I don't want to lose my family. I don't want to lose my house, my cars, any of that stuff with the job. Yeah. So what do you think? I think I know the answer, but reflection and knowing self has to be at the core, right? Like really figuring out who we are. The first thing we do is not go quit our job. I don't think I like my job. Don't just go quit your job. That is not going to be what Jason and I suggest. Maybe you end up there.
I generally don't make specific suggestions, but if I am making a suggestion to people, I usually suggest temperance and pausing and real discernment before taking big actions. Obviously, I want to know that I'm moving from the most informed position. Yeah. So I want to go back to something. This is just where I'm at. Personally. So I would say it's an understanding. It's not like a theoretical concept so none of this can be talked about without the reference to trauma. And there's not really people walking around on 2 feet that have not been affected by trauma. And again, when I use that word, I'm using it as a general function of life. Okay. And one of the functions of life is to protect us from overwhelming experiences. Okay. And I could get way more into it, but you can't, it will always be a part of the conversation because it's fundamental to a function of life if you really understand it. So just language fails us consistently. So the word trauma automatically brings up certain connotations, and it typically we sort of automatically reference to the external events or to the context. But when we reference trauma, we're referencing the internal experience of the being that comes into this world and goes through the experiences that we go through. So it's referencing to the internal injuries, right?
Based on the external circumstances.
Based on the external circumstances. And it would apply to everybody.
And so that we get everybody on the same page. And we've discussed this in the past, but if you haven't heard that episode, what you mean, and obviously correct if I'm wrong, what you mean when you say trauma and what is experienced internally. And a lot of us don't know that we've been through a traumatic experience. I want folks to know that there are traumatic experiences where your body will go through what we're about to describe, and you don't even realize it happened. and you think it wasn't that big of a deal, but it will. I think Jason's going to get to how it is a big deal and how we do need to recognize it. So trauma is when the body or mind, whatever, is overwhelmed by an event or set of circumstances to a point that it puts us in a fight or flight mode. Fight, flight, freeze. Does it have to put us into the amygdala, or is that what happens? What?
Let me try to give like a real general overview. So there's a whole dimension to our experience as human beings. Energetic, a whole dimension, which is the dimension of energy. That's not woo woo. So you get to refer to physics. That right now we use the language, we call it emotion. Mm-hmm. Energy in motion. So it's a whole dimension of a human being's experience. Okay. And most human beings, because we come into a traumatic world and go through many experiences that are beyond our understanding and that are painful, many on the relational level, like lack of attunement, lack of connection, feeling separated and alienated and alone, that's full of competition and brutality and that all affects us. Mm-hmm. We begin being affected by the world in our mother's womb. So anyway, we come into a world, there's all these painful energies and experiences that come up inside of us, and they're too much to process. We can't understand. So life suppresses and represses that energy, stores it in our body. It literally pushes it out of our consciousness, right? But it doesn't go anywhere. It stores it so we can process it later. We just don't get around to the processing part. And so what happens when a being starts to become disassociated from that dimension, the dimension of emotion, the dimension of energy, right? Because it's too much to feel, to process, to allow. We just continue that process through life, generally. So most people are walking around and we have a very disconnected relationship with that entire region, that entire dimension of our experiences. So that's why most people would say they spend their life mostly in our head, right? Mental activity, right? It's because we can't be in our bodies. We cannot experience those painful feelings that need to be processed that happened in our past. And so we spend a lot of time in movement, distraction, right? Avoiding, feeling, right? So my first question to people in this position would be, let's really understand, what do we mean by stuck? First off, it's a feeling, right? Isn't it? Mm-hmm. We're describing a feeling.
On that emotional scale, that is the energy in motion, is the feeling of stuck, right?
So what is that? What is it that we're really talking about? We want something, right? Move in a direction. We want something, and there's just like an inertia, right? Mm-hmm. So my first, honestly, the first thing that I had to do for my own self, you had to do for your own self, and what I worked to, and what you're working, and we're both working to help people do is learn how to understand that word for themselves. What does it mean?
And what would be a good, healthy way to, like, journaling, going through a self-inventory? What would be a good way to for one? Because I feel like this is where I started out, is I didn't fucking know. Like, I don't know. I just, like you said, I just feel that this isn't right, and I can't see a solution.
I want something.
I want something. I don't know. Right. And when you say what, I say, I don't know. Not this. That's all I know, is I don't want this. And so what's a good, healthy way? I know we've done some of this in the past, but just a quick, good, healthy way for somebody to kind of begin to peel that onion back of self and see what exactly is it that's making me feel. So we'll use me. And again, I get that my trauma is so obvious, but understand what Jason just told us is that we've all got this type of energy, unless you've worked on it, we've got this energy trapped in our bodies. So it may have happened in your childhood and you don't know, and it doesn't have to be something so awful that you've suppressed it. It's just something that happened, whether it was you felt neglect, you didn't have the nourishment, whatever it is that your body's, you don't have to remember. It doesn't have to be as obvious as your kid passed away. So here I am, my kid's passed away. I feel like I've done all this shoulders up work, but here I sit, I'm still just kind of stuck in this hamster wheel. Every day I get up, I I don't really accomplish anything, but I'm alive and I'm taking care of my kids and I've still got a house and I've still got a car.
Yeah.
So how do I begin to unravel, not knowing, in this state, I don't know. How do I begin to unravel that? Like seeing what it is that's making me feel that way.
And what a great question, right? I know for both of us, I mean, the first step ends up being a moment of clarity. So it involves this deep acceptance that I'm not okay. I'm not okay. This and that's okay.
Sure.
And I don't have it. So it starts with an acknowledgement, and unfortunately, often it has to get so bad, we sort of run out of self-sufficient options, right?
Mm-hmm.
We keep trying and trying and trying, and and then I think we just say, I can't do it. But one of the ways that I will talk about this with people is to talk about it like the process of tuning in. So you could say that where most people are tuned in is shoulders up, mental activity. It's where we identify as ourself, actually, mostly. People would mostly say that they're a brain walking around, or they exist right here between their eyes, right? Mm-hmm. It's sort of what it feels like to us, but that's not the case. 80% of information that goes to the brain comes from the body up. I'll sort of use that metaphor as like a radar, as an antenna, and where attention flows, energy flows. So we just don't recognize that people's attention is just up in mental activity. And so what I'll do is work with them to redirect that attention. You could say downward into the body. So I'll have them do a few check-ins just throughout the day. Simple things, man, like just stop and check in. Breathe, take a breath. Where am I? What do I notice in my experience? What do I feel? What's my heartbeat doing? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I'll have them do a few check-ins. Again, it's like a tuning in process.
Mm-hmm. And man, I've learned, and as I've done these things, they no longer sound, I don't know what the best word to use is. And a lot of what this podcast is based on is getting rid of this stigma. But it's like, man, that sounds stupid. I'm just going to stop and feel like, yeah, because we are moving so damn fast out here that we're all reacting. We're not responding. We're just, something happens and we react to it. And then later we go through whether that was a good reaction or not. And the idea that Jason is talking about, I believe, is kind of slowing all that down to be more in tune with self, right?
Absolutely. So when you get into, let's just take the polyvagal theory, which is one of the major theories in the trauma research field, right? And it has three major components of it. They'll talk about states: ventral state, sympathetic state, dorsal state. Okay, the first sort of development seems, according to the information, is about 500 years ago. It's seen in a fish. It's related to the dorsal state. Imagine a turtle. When it's in danger, what does it do? It goes inside. So that was like a first function. It's like a survival. Then about 1 million years after that, 400 million years ago, there seems to be a development of a sympathetic fight or flight. You can see it in fish. So think more fish, darting school. Then about 200 million years ago, there was the development of the ventral vagal system, the ventral state of the parasympathetic nervous system. About 200 million years ago, mammals developed this parasympathetic balancing component, right? And so I'm going to generalize. We use language that is totally misdirecting, like personality. We have all these labels we use, like anxiety and depression. And so we should, in my estimation, we should be more using languages like state of consciousness, state of being, which is all related to the nervous system. So for most people, we're not aware of the sympathetically activated state that we are in most of the time. Just with modern living and stress and all the traumas of our past and all the things that have not been addressed, that we move, we can't be still. We're always in motion, always thinking, always in the past, always in the future, never being here. And that has to do with the sympathetic state, that part of the system that's always overly active. And in that state, there's a second component of the polyvagal theory is called neuroception. It's referring to the way we consistently are scanning the environment for safety. It's a consistent part of the cognitive process of human, just the process of the human condition, right? We're consistently scanning. In the more sympathetically activated state with more higher levels of adrenaline and cortisol, we feel more fear, more disconnection, more insecurity. Do you follow? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's the state, sort of where the being is vibrating, that then is making the shape of the world, and informing our decisions and our options and our choices and our availability for creativity and solution. In that sympathetic state, we're very rigid in our thinking, right? In our movements, and hell, it's even physical. We're, very rigid.
And that's to protect us from the tiger.
Survive.
Yeah, from tigers and poisonous plants and all that shit. We got to be aware of, and so so that's why we're there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is to protect ourselves. So it's not something we're consciously putting ourselves in. It's our body taking care of it.
It's unconscious,
mm-hmm.
right? And so because we're so disconnected from our embodied felt experience as human beings, there is half of the information or more than half, you could say, is just unavailable to us. Ideas like fear. Well, you got to be in tune with the region of energy and emotion to be familiar with fear and its influence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Overwhelmed. This is something that we mentioned earlier in the list. Nervous system, unprocessed trauma. You're caught up in anxiety. I mean, you're burnt, overly exhausted.
All right? These, you're in the sympathetic space.
So in the polyvagal theory, so the first space, the dorsal space, is the shut down, overwhelmed, can't. You follow? So
mm-hmm.
that's often where a lot of us find ourselves, in that just frozen space.
And I hope people can listen and hear that. So first of all, something happened to you that maybe you do, maybe you don't remember. Second, life, but
life is happening and happening.
It is, and it has happened to you.
Yes.
And somewhere in there, you've got this energy that's stored up because you didn't dispel it and your body couldn't handle it at the time. And then that pushes us in subconsciously, pushes us into a certain state, whether it's the dorsal or the sympathetic. And then here we are, we can't reason, if at all, very well. It's hard to make any type of decisions if we can't reason. And so it's obvious how we're gaining a feeling of feeling stuck, because all this is happening, for lack of a better word, behind the scenes. We're not consciously dealing with this. I'm not consciously thinking about Joel dying that day. I'm not consciously thinking that I've put myself in a certain state. I just am there, and now I have this feeling. So, as you listen, you can hear Jason's kind of pulling the onion back for us and letting us know this is where we need to start thinking and looking, because I think next he's going to tell us how we can work on getting from one state to the next, right?
Yeah, amen. I mean, that's the idea, right? Because in the ventral state, I think of them like a guitar string. So the vagus nerve is the largest cranial nerve and the largest nerve bundle that's a part of the parasympathetic nervous system. Our part of our system that's well, I mean, it's just part of the balancing dynamics within the human system. So it does an unimaginable amount of things, from speeding up heart rate, slowing down heart rate, digestion. It comes from the base of the brainstem, and it's like a net, runs all the way down into our system and touches every organ. I mean, it's
some insane number of connections or something, right? Like a billion or some stupid number.
Yeah, I don't even know, man. And so, yes, as human beings, we are built for transcendence. Bodies, and I mean, you can go to the gym and work out and change the physical structure. So, yes, if we're aware of the differences in the states, and we can begin to tune into what that feels like, you can do a number of things. meditative work, vagus nerve stimulation exercises, which are phenomenal. And I encourage most people to start there before they even get to meditative practices, because they can't be still.
What's an example of a vagus nerve stimulating exercise?
They reference activation points for the vagus nerve, and there's one activation point that sits right next to the vocal cords. So in vagus nerve stimulation, there's a sort of a stream of it that will use humming sounds like ah, ee. So for an example, an exercise could be just taking a breath in and humming out.
Mm-hmm.
You can walk around all day and hum, and you're activating your parasympathetic nervous system.
Wow, yeah, that's simple enough.
Right. So what a lot of times what happens in my, or at least the way I see it, is after we've tried to make these changes so many times and nothing's worked, we sort of interpret it as a personal failure, right? And what I work to help people understand is no, it was just a lack of clarity. You don't understand the nervous system, how the nervous system works. The world never told us that. It never gave us that information. And so really, because we don't have that information, the systems we have in place just aren't as effective as they could be. Really getting unstuck, I would say, is one of the primary immediate necessities is to begin the process of nervous system reorganization. So that's vagus nerve stimulation stuff. It's just sitting down every day and trying to tolerate the discomfort, going to therapy. I mean, anyway, a million different things that are aimed at helping you just increase in awareness around what's actually going on in your body, in your system, So you have more clarity on what is it? Is it fear? Mm-hmm. Is it fear? Mm-hmm. Is it culture that tells you should want these things? You should want this car, this house, this amount of money. And because you don't have it, now there's some feeling of being stuck. Are you 25 years old and you're not in the same space as your friends, right? But that somehow that feels okay to you and it doesn't feel like you want to be, but do you understand what I mean? Like what's actually going on?
Yeah. And I think so much, you touch on societal influence on that, the external, pressure, if you will. And man, has that been so influential in my being. And then in what I would say awakening is like, that's not what I want. That's not what I want to do. And I'm not going
to move from your own frame of reference.
Right.
Your own values, your own intrinsic. And actually, when you're in the process of awakening, what starts to happen, it seems pretty naturally, is you start to want to be of service.
Yeah. And then, and you want to turn to help. Yeah. You want
to turn like a natural function of healing.
Yeah. And that's so interesting. Yeah. It's interesting how that happens.
The biggest wound, the original wound, it's how we're all so disconnected, man. We're all so disconnected from each other, especially in this culture. It's so isolating. It's so hard on us in ways that we can't imagine.
And it's ironic because never have we been more connected via the internet, via phones in our pocket. But then we use those same tools to disconnect us. And, it happens. I don't know if it's happening from maybe you could shed some light on if it's happening because of protection of self. We don't really get truth in social media. We get everybody's best moments. And then, so, now instead of just comparing ourselves to the magazine or the newspaper articles, we're now comparing ourselves with what we're inundated with constantly, which is still just the best of that individual, and comparisons again to what we were taught we wanted and taught we needed and taught we had to have. And so then it becomes a belief. And then when we really look at it, we're like, this isn't really what I want. We're starting to figure out a little bit about ourselves, and that there's some things kind of behind the scenes going on that while we do control them, we're not controlling because nobody's ever told us about that they even existed, or B, how.
We have the capacity, I would put it that way,
to control,
to understand, to relate to harness.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's not as much of a, you can turn it on and off as much as it is you can learn about it and understand it. And in that you can have some influence. Is that maybe a little less?
Yeah. well, let's put it this. So you, okay. In the process of disassociation and disconnection as human beings, when we get really deeply cut off from that dimension of our experience, it directly affects our ability to experience joy, bliss, contentness,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't real immense experiences of joy without knowing sorrow, feeling sorrow, so we are limited in ways that we don't really recognize. So healing, actually, what happens is you experience more. There's more here for us, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
paradoxical, but think about it. If it's really primarily related to unconscious material, and then you're starting to become conscious, you could refer this into your own experience. You feel more, you
Mm-hmm.
notice more, you're
Yep.
experiencing more, right?
Yep. And as you do that, that's when we get into what we're focusing on. So where their energy is going, because the more we're experiencing and understanding and et cetera, the more opportunity there is to focus on the positive or the negative. And right. And
Yeah,
when
I
we
would
start to
say
slide into focusing on the negative, then we have self.
I would say we give ourselves the opportunity for choice.
Yeah. And I'm always talking about focus on the positive, focus on the positive. If we don't, we're not going to see answers laying right in front of us. We're going to filter them right out. And so here's an opportunity where we need to do that. We're experiencing all these new things because we're paying attention to them. We're learning about them and we're understanding them. We're paying attention to them so we can learn more about ourselves. And
Yeah,
then we
yeah,
have
yeah.
an
And let me
opportunity.
let me say this even
Yeah.
just to reflect a little bit deeper. So primarily, the way that we get rid of negative thoughts is learning to release the energy that contributes to them in the body. So the nervous system reorganization, which means healing of old rigid parts of the system, will mean a degree of flexibility. And what we're actually it's like when we're releasing, so the negative self concepts or ideas or limiting beliefs or whatnot, they are rooted in the energy stored in the body, like they're interrelated. So in going in and beginning to, you say, process and know ourselves and go deeper inside, when you start to release that energy and process it, a byproduct is there's just, you could say, less of a less frequency of negative self images and ideas.
Because you've released something that was in there creating them and
Yeah, that was
not.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, that may not be mind bending to somebody who's had their head studying this for a long time, but that's mind
Mom
bending
bending to
for,
me, man.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's
It's
mind bending to me.
miraculous. It's amazing. I mean, it's magic. Like, what are you talking about?
It is. At first when we hear these things, it's like, oh, it's bullshit. You can't, and it's not bullshit. There is, we both live it, and focusing on these things helps us be more adaptable. And I believe everybody now
Great word.
understands it's not survival of the fittest, it's survival of the adaptablest. One who can adapt is the one who will survive. And if we don't know how a car works, then we're not going to use it properly. We don't know how the damn thing works. We'll be pushing the car down the street. You have our family in it and we're pushing it. Well, anybody who knows how the car works is going to say, what a fool. Why is he pushing his car? Is he out of gas? Well, he didn't know to put gas in it. So the same goes with our bodies. And I'm not going to use minds, although I think that a lot of people think that it's all going on just in our minds. It's not. It's our whole body. And I think that's a lot of what we're talking about here.
Well, let me reiterate this too. Don't lose your train of thought again. Just think of it this way. Most of the information the brain is just a processing center. Do you understand? You follow?
Mm-hmm.
And so, most of the information that comes in there to be processed comes from the body.
Okay.
We're not tuned to that information. We're
mm-hmm.
not attuned to 80% of the information that's coming in.
Yeah, we don't even know that it's occurring. It's all just occurring behind the scenes. And I think that learning and understanding how the machine of the body works is a crucial piece. Jason's given us a tip. Slow down 3 times a day, 4 times a day if you've got time, to really see how you feel. And that is simply that. It is, I think Jason said, check your heart rate, check your breathing pattern, check, do you have any certain type of emotional leanings in that moment? Are you dealing with something that you're like, this is really bothering me right now? And then I believe after that, what happens is then we can start learning what is it. So I often talk about the only emotions I had before I dove into this whole recovery thing was angry and not angry. And angry really was fear, hurt feelings, sadness, etc. So we can't just say, well, I'm pissed off. Well, okay. And you could be angry. Angry is an emotion we can have. But if we're feeling one emotion all the time, we're probably not really feeling that emotion. It's just that our emotions are coming out of our body in that way. So more understanding of what is it. So now that I know I got to put gas in the car just to get it to run. Okay, now I'm putting gas in it. Well, now there's all these fucking lights everywhere. There's blinkers and there's windshield wipers and there's check engine lights and all these other things, right, are happening in our bodies instead of our cars. It's things like happiness, fear, sadness, hurt feelings, things like that. So, and all this goes back to being stuck, because I believe all of these things are what contribute to the actual feeling of being stuck, right? So how does one start to peel that onion back? And I think it goes back to the original question of why do you feel stuck? What is stuck to you? And instead of just responding to that question of, well, fuck, I don't know, it's just not this. So to get it a little deeper than that, how can we start to maybe look at how we feel? Like what
you mean, how you start identifying?
Yeah, it's the identification of the emotion. And I'm not trying to get wrapped around the axles on the term.
I think it's real simple, man.
Okay.
I think it's innate and it's natural. Like, yeah, there are times where something happens and you wouldn't be able to know exactly why. Things just come up as human. I don't, maybe the moon moved 2 feet to the left. I don't know what, you know what I mean? But we can learn to know, oh, that's fear. In my experience, discomfort, discontentness, dis-ease generally points to fear. And so, man, listen, a lot of the discomfort we feel, there's not a whole lot of names for it. You can generally boil it down to fear. But that being said, it's innate, it's natural. We know, we just have to open up to the communication.
So just simply, and I can't really
we know what
remember.
Is. We know what sad is.
Yeah. We know what the definition of it is.
Yeah,
we just don't know that that's what we are, because we're not really checking in with ourselves.
Yeah.
And so we're reacting anger.
Yeah.
Whereas if we stopped and reflected, we'd say, well, shit, I'm really sad. I'm not angry.
Well,
Jason hurt my feelings, and as a response, I said "F you," which was which felt like anger.
Perfect example. And in my experience, I would say, I don't know if it's cultural. All I know is it's the only reference I have, so I could say it seems to be cultural. But a primary chronic state or feeling or sense of that happens all the time for people is shame. And again, if you look at any information, if you go to Brene Brown, if you go to AJ Bond, if you go to any people that are having any conversations around shame, the first thing that you'll see them talking about is learning to know what it feels like, to differentiate, right? Now, shame is more complex, but we know it, discussed. We're from, you know what I mean? So like, so yeah, there can be some helpful, obviously one of the things I'm doing with people is helping them clarify and, okay, that's shame. That's not guilt. You know what I mean? So there can be some helpful, we can seek support and information that can be helpful,
Yeah. But I think the bottom line, and again, we were just starting this, I don't think in an hour long episode, we're going to be able to tell somebody how to go from severely stuck to unstuck. But so here's why you're feeling stuck. We talked about all the things that could be, this is a very overwhelming topic to just try to break down, but to be as simple about it as we can. Being stuck can oftentimes happen. We didn't even do anything to get there. We just get there and like, oh shit, I don't feel good. I don't want to feel like this anymore. And so you're that way. Well, so the first thing we do is start checking in with self, start paying attention, start educating ourselves on things like polyvagal theory, on things like the vagus nerve stimulation, meditation. Those are all key tools that can be used to help yourself begin to unwind the mess, if you will, that we find ourselves in. Then we find ourselves identifying emotions. And when you're doing this, Jason makes clear, we know what the terms mean. We know what sadness means. We know what hurt feelings are. We know what scared is. And so if we slow down and just begin to identify how we feel, then say, okay, well, that most relates to fear, or that most relates to sadness, or
you can't do anything about something you don't claim.
And so you got to claim it, own it, right? Feel it.
Yep. And
then it can, and in through that we can release some of it.
Information in there. You could put it that way. It's the most general way to say it.
There's information there, and we need to look at it.
Yes. It's an information system, you could say. Like if I'm angry, it might mean that about boundaries being violated, or I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know, or I'm misinterpreting a thing or taking a thing personal, or, I don't.
There's going to be a whole episode on just dealing with them, or just feeling emotions. We can do a whole episode on that. We will. But in general terms, understanding them, and then that can lead to a natural conversation. So let's say that I feel stuck, and it's a very rudimentary example. I'm doing it on the fly. I'm feeling stuck about something. I go to my boss, Jason, and I've identified that I feel stuck in my job because I don't feel like I'm appreciated. I don't feel like that I'm having any growth. I'm just going to be doing the same thing over and over. So I go to my boss, Jason, and I'm able to say, but maybe boss is a bad example, a coworker, and say, hey man, if you could do this, I would be very, if you could just acknowledge this, or I feel this when so expressing, and work is a bad example. I think in a relationship. So I go to my friend, I love Jason to death. He's a friend, but I've found that, I have a certain feeling I'm able to express. Now it's how I feel. This is how I feel when this happens. I don't want to tell Jason how to act. I don't want to tell Jason what to do. But I do want to express to Jason that I have a certain feeling, and I want to express that this is how I feel when this occurs. Then, so then I've unloaded my feelings, not on Jason, not because Jason needed it. It was because I needed it. And in unloading, I am able to understand why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. I'm able to set a boundary for myself.
You communicated.
And I communicated it. And in the communication, don't we have some release there?
Yeah, sure.
I would think so, because
it's an energetic release, right? I mean, you're processing, you're expressing,
right? You're
giving it life, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that definitely would.
And so I let Jason know I've now set a boundary that I can know that if it's being crossed, then maybe I need to look at my relationship overall. And now step back and remove Jason and just have this conversation with yourself about your job or about your relationships or about anything in your life. And instead of it being a human being where you have to say, Jason, when you do X, I feel Y. Instead, I feel sad, stuck, whatever. Okay, well, why? What's going on? And then start to look at, these are the things that make me feel negative emotion, quote unquote. This makes me feel sad. This makes me feel scared. This makes me feel, and then we can say, okay, well, now I want to address that issue. I don't want to feel scared anymore. I don't want to feel like I'm running out of money anymore. I don't want to feel like I'm not progressing or not going anywhere. Okay, well, what does that look like? What does progression look like to you? What does growth look like? And then we start getting into our goals, and we start talking about, well, these are the things that I want. And now I've got goals. And once we have goals, then we tell the body what we're going to do about those goals, and we start to set them. Does that all sound like a pathway to you?
Yeah. I mean, it's all a part of it. Like, again, it all starts at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It all starts at home, right?
it's
Knowing what we mean by that phrase,
yeah. It's
knowing what it is.
yeah, it's easier, I think, to use a relationship example as an example, but really, all this is in us. It's all inside of us. But when
Yeah.
someone's not used to that, I think it's, I'm trying to give an analogy when somebody's not really used to dealing with just self and really having a nice, solid conversation with the man in the mirror and saying, "Yo, we're not going to put up with this anymore. I love me too much to feel this way any
Yeah, it
longer."
takes a long time to get
That
there.
takes a long time. So but I can see it in a
I
relationship.
I can start maybe open up to being honest.
Yeah. With yourself.
With yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, man, like, if we all, so think about it. I'm just trying to imagine right now, again, the whole idea of stuck, and like how many different things it could actually be referring to.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a part of our experience where we feel the truth of having more to offer, more to give, more to be. There's more here, right? It seems to me, I think that's one of the most frustrating things we experience as human beings. And Native Americans, their spiritual philosophical orientation, essentially the whole purpose of living is for us to sing our song fully, be fully ourselves, fully authentic, totally.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so in my own experience, the inability to do that for a million different reasons is devastating. And I think that's where many of us are. And we don't have the support that maybe gives us the courage
Mm-hmm.
and the extra strength. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So it's so hard to do any of this stuff just because it all feels like we're doing it alone.
And we are doing it alone a lot of times.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like it's the state of things,
turning inward, right?
But I'm just sort of reflecting on, I guess, in some ways, just then of what makes it so difficult, and like also that, again, how the feeling stuck is really related to our hearts wanting to give more and be more and do more things and be more of a part of life. Again, just starting the process of being still, of slowing down. It can be the beginning of a new life.
To put a bow on it, I still have a hard time with it. But just in the little bit that I've gotten things to slow down. And then when I find myself being taken over by an emotion that I don't like, we'll just
agitated, you could say.
Yeah, agitated.
Right.
I said, what am I upset about? What's going on? And when I slow down and I'm sitting right here, I'm all good. I get myself present. Again, meditation is such a good practice to be able to get ourselves trained to do this. What am I upset about? I've got everything that I need. Right now, I have everything I need. I'm working to get other things. Maybe I'll get them, maybe I won't. But the understanding of self and understanding right here, right now, and having all I need, because that external pressure the society gives us is that we need all this other shit, because I think because there's somebody behind the other shit who's wanting to sell it to us. And that's why the pressure is probably
something related to that.
It's probably why the pressure's there, but we won't go too far off that. So I think when we can really, like Jason says, we can just slow things down. I mean, we are so inundated with information at all times. A lot of it doesn't do anything but impact us negatively. It doesn't help us in any way. But we find ourselves as a society, especially in the United States, staring at an advertisement box that is designed to keep us staring at it. And so there's several ways to do that, and we just take all that in. And so not understanding ourselves, not unplugging, not slowing down, we can do nothing but stay reactive, stay overwhelmed. Our bodies are overwhelmed. There's life happening to us that we're not processing. So it's just stacking and stacking and stacking and stacking. And then we find ourselves under this big load of stuff and feeling stuck. So I really appreciate all that. This is going to be something that we're going to talk a lot about. The topic of shame. There's an episode on just shame where Jason and I talk about shame. Jason did a really good job educating me on the differences in guilt and shame. I think it can really benefit you if you want to go take a listen to that. And I think, Jason, if you got anything else you want to say to put a bow on this, but I think that reflection and accountability, core things to successfully humaning, I think, is to really look in the mirror a lot and to really be honest with yourself. If there's more that you do find that you have this desire that you have more you need to give to have a full life, that you pay attention to that. Don't just ignore it, because in ignoring it, we add to the feeling of being stuck. And so understanding you have more, that you feeling that way because you have more to give, and really paying attention to that, leaning into it, is, I think, a huge first step on relieving oneself from these feelings.
Amen. Like that responsibility for my state of consciousness, for my experience, right? It's necessary for us. We can no longer leave it in the hands of the world, of the relationships, of the jobs. We have to go inside. We have to develop that inward reflection. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And think about this. We say this all the time. This is sort of the bow, we'll say, know yourself, know thyself. What does that mean? Okay, in my estimation as a human, there's a whole dimension of our experience that lies in the unconscious, or i.e. the body. Mm-hmm. Right? And it seems very vital. If we want to know thyself, we need to know these energies that move around in us, these energies of desire, fear, shame. They make our reality. Carl Jung said, until you are familiar with the unconscious, it will affect every aspect of your life, and you will call it fate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is my fate.
It seems to be really important for us to get to know all dimensions of our experience.
Let's not be the one pushing the car down the road. Let's be the guy driving, at least driving the damn thing. You know what I mean? Yeah. And again, that comes with understanding.
Real familiar with the gears.
Yeah. Yeah. And the more and it gets to a point where you not only know about putting gas in it, but you know what all the lights do, you know what all the gears do. You know what its limitations are and not.
Yeah, man. Listen, if you're really interested, you can just go out there and look for people like Dr. Casey Means right now, who wrote a book called Good Energy. She's all over the place right now. Dr. Zach Bush, who is another person that talks a lot about gut health. We don't recognize this really, but we are in a really bad shape culturally. We don't even know in many dysfunctional and traumatic our system actually is. From the food that is mass produced and pumped into people's systems, and that's fine. I understand responsibility and personal, but who's responsible for making food addictive? Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Right, and then you got an educational. Anyway,
there's a lot over the factors.
We are in a position where there are many things that are affecting our experience of life that we're just uneducated on. We're just uneducated on the gut. But think about it, the gut. Why is there so much conversation right now around the gut? The gut's influence, the neurotransmitters in the gut, and the gut biome. If the body isn't completely influential in the nature in relation to our feeling and experience of the world.
Yep. Yeah, and it's so huge that we've been able to get to that point. I mean, that's
where we are evolutionarily.
Yeah,
man.
We
see it. That's so this is just an evolutionary step for humans. It's like it's becoming more attuned to why you might get irritated when you get hungry.
And why, when we put processed foods that were created by the tobacco industry, when the cigarettes started going downhill and they bought all the food places, they put in the addictive shit. You know what I mean? It is hard. All the things we're talking about, it's hard. Everything. Even the stopping 3-4 times a day to check in with yourself, hard. Amen. All of it's hard. Yeah. But it's hard feeling stuck, and it's hard being depressed, and it's hard not having a purpose, and it's hard not having these things. It's hard having all that shit piled up inside you that keeps you generating these negative feelings. All that shit's hard. And if we can just get sick and tired of that hard and say, okay, I want it to be hard, but at least at the end of it, it's got some happy and good stuff with it. It's not just going to keep the cesspool of negativity going. It is all hard, but at the end of one hard, there's just more misery and pain, and at the end of the other hard, and I say end, every single day is until we die is what we got, how we got to work on this thing. But at least there's happiness and fulfillment and purpose and drive and all that on the other side of this hard work. Everybody listening, we hope that we brought some value to your day and your time. We sure appreciate your time. We know that's your most valuable asset. We'll continue to try our hardest to give you as much value as possible. Please stay tuned with us, and we hope that you have a great day.